Alberta's only federal cabinet minister out this Wednesday night. The controversies hovering over Randy Boissonnault.
Obviously, there's issues coming forward.
And the calls for his resignation. A powerful storm known as a bomb cyclone blasts through BC's south coast. The damage and the thousands left in the dark. New weaponry, long-range missiles, and now landmines. Why the U.S. is rapidly ramping up support to Ukraine. And retiring the racket.
I just want to be remembered as a good person.
The love for tennis ace Rafael Nadal.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. There is more upheaval in the government of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Employment Minister Randy Boissonnault has been removed from cabinet, though he will remain in the Liberal caucus. The MP from Edmonton has long been under a cloud of controversy related to the business dealings of his former medical supply business. Stories first broken by Global News. Just yesterday, we reported that Edmonton police are now investigating an allegation of fraud against Boissonnault's former company and business partner. There are also questions about a lack of clarity about Boissonnault's Indigenous ancestry. There are lots of strands to this story. We start our coverage with Mackenzie Gray and the political fallout.
After months of questions, Randy Boissonnault is finally out of cabinet, Donna, but the opposition parties are wondering, what took so long?
He knew the minister had claimed there was another Randy when there was no other Randy. Why is it that he always stands up for corruption on his own side?
The member for Edmonton Centre has stepped down from cabinet to focus on clearing these allegations.
But it's not clear if Boissonnault quit or was fired. A statement from the Prime Minister's office that dropped right before question period said that Trudeau and Boissonnault agreed that Mr. Boissonnault will step away from cabinet effective immediately. Mr. Boissonnault will focus on clearing the allegations made against him. Allegations that Global News first reported on, which involve extensive questions about his personal business dealings, including his business partner having ties to a woman linked with drug trafficking.
I think of my great-grandmother, full-blooded Cree woman, Lucy Brenneyes.
Boissonnault also faced questions over his claim he was non-status adoptive Cree.
Et mon nom en Cree qui est homme aigle fort.
Claiming his Cree name was Strong Eagle Man, but then shifted to saying his family belonged to the Métis Nation of Alberta, after the National Post reported a company he co-owned applied for government contracts while claiming to be Indigenous-owned. Boissonnault says he never claimed he was Indigenous and was not aware that his business took Indigenous contracts. Despite his denials, there was cross-party calls for his resignation.
It's a good day for Indigenous people to know that Canadians, Indigenous people, and politicians take this issue seriously, and when and where pretendings exist, we will find them and we will get justice for Indigenous people.
Just yesterday, the Prime Minister supported Boissonnault.
I'm happy that he is continuing to lead on issues around jobs and employment and represent Alberta in our government.
Briefly on Mr. Boissonnault's resignation.
Today, he ducked questions from reporters, but the Northern Affairs Minister backed the departure.
I support Randy's decision, and I just want to note that Randy was always a great ally to Indigenous caucus since 2015.
Mackenzie, the Prime Minister stood by Boissonnault just yesterday. So do we know why he's acting now when allegations about Boissonnault's business dealings and his ancestry have been bubbling away for months? Is it that he's become too much of a political liability?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, Donna. Boissonnault had become a major distraction for the Liberals in a long line of problems that government's facing right now. The biggest issue is likely Boissonnault's shifting claims around his family's Indigenous ancestry. Remember, Justin Trudeau has said his most important relationship is with Indigenous people. So Boissonnault's continued presidency in cabinet seem to be untenable. And it also creates a hole that Justin Trudeau is going to have to fill in cabinet with a shuffle that is likely to happen soon. And Boissonnault is one of two Liberal MPs from Alberta. The other is George Shahal, and he's been one of the dissenting MPs looking for Trudeau to leave. So that means in the new cabinet, there's unlikely to be anyone from Alberta, and it will be a very new-looking cabinet, Donna. Boissonnault's departure means that 7 different cabinet ministers that started 2024 will have quit cabinet.
Okay, Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa, thank you. Our national investigative correspondent Krista Hessey was first to report on the questionable practices of Boissonnault's former company and business partner. She filed multiple stories about it, and she's with me now to explain the new allegations that Edmonton police are investigating. Krista.
Donna, we've been reporting on Boissonnault's business dealings for 7 months. Today's exit from cabinet comes after our latest reporting that Edmonton police are investigating Boissonnault's former company and business partner.
Boissonnault co-founded Global Health Imports, or GHI, a medical supply company, in 2020, after he had been defeated in the 2019 federal election. He was re-elected in 2021, though, and it's after that that things get complicated. In 2022, according to court documents, Global Health Imports entered into a contract to sell $3 million worth of gloves to a U.S. company called 4M Medical. 4M's lawyer, Michael Weber, alleges the gloves were never delivered, and his $300,000 deposit was not returned. In an affidavit, which Weber says he sent to police in July, he alleges Boissonnault's former business partner, Stephen Anderson, through his corporations, was running a fraudulent scheme that involved inducing prospective purchasers to provide a large deposit for a quantity of goods he had no means or intention of providing. Boissonnault says he resigned from GHI in the fall of 2021 following his re-election, but he continued to own a 50% stake in the business until June of this year. Ministers are allowed to own shares in a private company, but it is illegal for them to manage the business while in office. Court evidence shows Anderson texted Weber, the American 4M medical lawyer, twice in September 2022, telling Weber that he was consulting someone named Randy about the deal. Weber said Anderson told him Randy was a partner at GHI and a member of Parliament. Boissonnault says he's had nothing to do with the company since 2021.
If Mr. Anderson is using my name without my knowledge, which, I never gave him permission to do that, then he should share that.
In a statement, Boissonnault's office tells us he has never been contacted by Edmonton Police or any other law enforcement agency regarding Global Health Imports or Mr. Anderson.
Neither Anderson or his lawyer have responded to our request for comment. So far, no one has been charged in the criminal investigation, but it is active. Donna?
All right, Krista Hessey in Toronto, thanks. And you can find all of Krista's investigative reporting on Randy Boissonnault on our website, globalnews.ca. In British Columbia, tens of thousands of people are still without power after a major storm blasted Vancouver Island and BC's south coast. High winds brought down trees and made travel dangerous. Hydro crews are working around the clock to restore electricity in multiple coastal communities. This is what the storm system known as a bomb cyclone looked like. It packed wind gusts of up to 160 kilometers an hour. That's the strength of a Category 2 hurricane. There are no reports of any deaths or major injuries in Canada, but south of the border in Washington state, at least 2 people were killed by downed trees. Neetu Garcha looks at the impact of the storm in BC.
A massive tree brought down by fierce winds crashing onto this house in Port Moody, BC.
When this tree came down next door, the house just shook and vibrated. I've never been scared to be in the house before, and I was scared last night.
A so-called bomb cyclone hit BC's southwest Tuesday night into Wednesday, causing widespread power outages as near-record hurricane-force winds downed power lines and uprooted trees.
I have no heat, no power. This is a collector car.
In this Vancouver neighborhood, residents woke up to find their street blocked off after this tree fell onto that car.
I ran outside. I saw my tree on fire because it fell.
This boy, home alone, says he was electrocuted by a power outlet, then saw this outside.
Pretty scary, yeah.
Ferry services, including major routes between Vancouver and Vancouver Island, were cancelled.
It's frustrating. Ubered out here twice now and Ubered back home once.
But I got my pillow, my book, my snacks.
It is rare that we would see mass cancellations like this, in particular kind of all the sailings on the major routes. We know people have places to be and we really, avoid cancelling unless necessary.
And while there's always those who are undeterred by the wild weather.
Wet and windy.
Well, we have our international student from Barcelona that's never been on the breakwater before.
Please, do you like the storm watching? Yeah, it's absolutely awesome.
The cleanup effort is extensive. The Souk School District posting these photos of students helping out after some were stuck when their bus route was cut off by downed power lines. At least 5 highways were closed on Vancouver Island, where wind speeds broke all-time records in some areas.
We had an aircraft that had been blown over the fence by the heavy winds last night. It appears that the cables or the cords that were holding the aircraft down on our tie-down wire broke from the force of the winds last night.
For now, the storm has subsided in most places as communities brace for another powerful windstorm set to hit the region on Friday. Neetu Garcha, Global News, Vancouver.
Winter weather has arrived across parts of the prairies. As much as 40 centimeters of snow fell in eastern Saskatchewan and western Manitoba. It was enough to close some highways and schools in both provinces. More snow is forecast this weekend. As winter approaches in Ukraine, its military is getting more firepower. For the first time, Ukraine fired long-range British-made Storm Shadow missiles at Russian targets. And in a major shift in American policy, President Joe Biden has agreed to supply Ukraine with anti-personnel landmines. They're banned by more than 150 countries because they don't discriminate between civilians and combatants. Nathaniel Dove reports on why Ukraine is now getting more lethal weapons.
The threat of imminent Russian ballistic missile attacks shutting down several Western embassies in Kyiv. The student says she's afraid. Ukrainian intelligence later reporting the threat messages were fake, but tensions remain high. On Tuesday, Ukraine used American-made long-range missiles to strike Russia. The Kremlin downplayed any damage.
And I think this is what Ukraine needs. It needs the scale, because actually giving one or two or a dozen of long-range missiles only irritates the bear.
This analyst says U.S. President Joe Biden is helping Kyiv before Donald Trump takes office and potentially pushes Ukraine to settle for a deal. But as desperate as Ukraine is, it's facing fierce criticism. The Washington Post reporting the U.S. is arming Ukraine with landmines to slow the Russian advance. Neither Russia nor the U.S. signed the treaty banning them. The man who helped negotiate the convention says Ukraine is undermining what it's fighting for.
But this really is another serious blow to the establishment of a decent, serious international system of guardrails against violence and conflict and civilian casualties.
New weapons, but are they enough?
Putin is focused on winning this war. He will not stop on his own.
Ukraine is still calling on the international community for help. Nathaniel Dove, Global News, Toronto.
A man accused of randomly stabbing a teenage boy to death at a Toronto subway station has pleaded guilty. Jordan O'Brien Tobin, wearing a green prison-issued sweater, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder 2 months before his trial was set to begin. In March 2023, he stabbed 16-year-old Gabriel Magalis, who was sitting on a bench at Keele Station. That attack was unprovoked. A sentencing hearing has been set for February. The Crown is expected to ask for at least 18 years in prison before eligibility for parole. New details about the death of a young gorilla at the Calgary Zoo. Coming up, why the facility says human error is to blame. Alec Baldwin's controversial film Rust premiered today, more than 3 years after cinematographer Helena Hutchins was shot and killed on the set. Hutchins was honored as the film opened in Poland. The 42-year-old cinematographer died when a live round was fired from a prop revolver being handled by producer and star Alec Baldwin. He was not at the premiere. Hutchins' mother, who is suing the production and Baldwin, boycotted the event. A private funeral took place in England today for former One Direction singer Liam Payne. He died last month in a fall from a hotel balcony in Buenos Aires. The 31-year-old's former bandmates were among the mourners. The singer had traces of alcohol, cocaine, and a prescription antidepressant in his system, and 3 people have been charged in connection with his death. There's an update on the death of a young gorilla at the Calgary Zoo. The zoo says on November 12th, a 2-year-old western lowland gorilla named Iari was moving between spaces in an area behind the zoo's gorilla enclosure. A member of Iari's care team intended to activate a hydraulic door that was used to separate her from other gorillas for a training session, but mistakenly activated the wrong door. It struck Iari, causing a traumatic head injury.
The gorilla team retrieved Iari from the troop, and veterinary team immediately commenced life-saving measures, including CPR, Sadly, Iyari succumbed to her injuries shortly after 9:30 a.m.
The Calgary Zoo says the worker involved is devastated and will be reassigned to another area of the zoo. The zoo's gorilla care team will also be trained to confirm they can properly operate the zoo's doors. Ahead, the horror ISIS inflicted on a Yazidi family who eventually escaped to Canada. In August of 2014, the so-called Islamic State launched a ruthless campaign of terror in Iraq. It attempted to wipe out the Yazidi people, a religious minority in Iraq. Villages were stormed and Yazidis were forced to convert to Islam or be killed. That violence displaced more than 400,000 people. More than 5,000 men and older women were massacred, and over 6,000 women and children were tortured and trafficked as sex slaves. In part 3 of our Global News investigation, Jeff Semple has the story of one Yazidi family who survived, eventually made it to Canada, but without one of their daughters.
When ISIS rose to power 10 years ago in Syria and Iraq, one of its first orders of business was genocide. The so-called Islamic State sought to eliminate all other religions, including Iraq's Yazidi minority. It was a day we can never forget, says Ali Bashar. He lived with his wife and 3 children in the Iraqi village of Kojo. When ISIS arrived, the community was offered a choice: hand over their belongings and convert to Islam or die. He says hundreds of Yazidi men were taken in groups to a farm and told to climb into an empty swimming pool. Then ISIS opened fire. Ali was shot twice in the back. He played dead among the bodies until ISIS left. My life was saved, but we didn't know if my family was alive, he says. His son, Burke, is still missing and presumed dead. His wife and daughters were kept as ISIS slaves. His wife, Samu, says she still can't talk about it. Eventually, she and one of her daughters escaped, and the family came to Canada as refugees, but without their youngest daughter. Wafa was still being held captive. She was 12 when ISIS kidnapped her and took her to Syria. Speaking to us from northern Iraq, she says she was bought and sold multiple times, raped, beaten, and electrocuted. In 2022, after 8 years in ISIS captivity, she was finally freed, but has nothing left. She's applied to join her parents in Canada, but hasn't received an answer.
A plan to help Yazidi women and children.
In 2017, the Canadian government announced it was accepting 1,200 Yazidi refugees and allowed them to sponsor 400 family members. But that program has reached its limit. I'm in a bad situation, she says. I want to be with my family. Her parents have watched in horror as Canada has brought home Canadians who allegedly traveled to join ISIS, including 9 women, only 3 of whom have been charged.
What were the women of ISIS like?
They all took part in it. At times, they were worse than the men, she says. Ali was recently diagnosed with a brain tumor. He hopes to live long enough to see his daughter again in Canada. Jeff Semple, Global News, Toronto.
Emotional exit. Next, what this tennis great brought to the game. This painting by a Belgian artist puts him into an exclusive club of artists whose works have sold for more than $100 million. René Magritte's L'Empire des Lumières sold at auction for more than $121 million, the most for a work by the surrealist painter. The eerie streetscape was purchased over the phone by a bidder whose identity was not revealed. One of the greatest tennis players of all time has hung up his racket. For 23 years, Rafael Nadal's ferocity, his physicality, his relentlessness made him one of the sport's ultimate competitors and must-see TV for millions of fans. He played his final match on Tuesday. Eric Sorensen looks back on Nadal's legendary career.
The Spanish crowd, in its own way, was saying thank you. In his final match, Rafael Nadal could still produce moments like this. And he would keep playing, he says, but his body won't let him. The emotions flowed.
Just a kid that follow their dreams.
Rafael Nadal, the 17-year-old Spaniard, about to make his Davis Cup debut.
A teenage sensation, Nadal would go on to win 22 Grand Slams, including the French Open 14 times, the undisputed king of clay courts. His fighting spirit made him a champion. His grace and humility made him something more. He never broke a tennis racket in anger.
You just have meant so much in my career.
The greatest players are paying tribute.
It's been incredible watching you.
Celebrities, too.
Un besito para tú y tu familia.
He'll always be remembered for his rivalry with Roger Federer. They played some of the greatest tennis matches in history.
We've had a very intense rivalry throughout our careers, but it's been a very healthy rivalry.
A rivalry not just about winning, said Nadal, but respect for each other. In a heartfelt letter, Federer writes that they took the journey together. You made me reimagine my game. You made the whole tennis world proud. At his last tournament, fans just wanted to see him one more time. It is a privilege to watch him, says this man. Fellow player David Ferrer told Nadal today, "You've been the role model any person, any player wants to be."
I just want to be remembered as a good person.
It says something that Rafa would want to be remembered for the person he is, as much as anything he did in tennis. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Niagara Falls, Ontario. Beautiful rainbow. We'd love to see Your Canada. Please email it to globalnational@globalnews.ca. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.